Hello and welcome, and thank you so much for tuning in and joining our congregation in our meeting. Um, so today I'd like to talk about the one time that Stephen Hawking was wrong about the universe. It's a really fascinating story, and I think it really underlies one of the reasons why intersectionality is so important as a cornerstone of what we've been talking about for the past few weeks. Intersectionality, in our view, is the idea that philosophy and religion and science are really artificially separated. And as means of spiritual nourishment, in some ways, they should all be really considered together as one. We should try and do what we can to break down the artificial barriers between these different disciplines. So I want to preface this by saying that I have the utmost respect for Stephen Hawking. He was an amazing, amazing physicist, scientist, thinker, and a lot of his published ideas are things that I think of often very deeply. And to his credit, one of his greatest intellectual strengths was his humility and his ability to admit that he was wrong and do so quite graciously. And even when he was wrong, he viewed his incorrectness as still an important advancement of the sciences. Yet another reason to respect him tremendously. Stephen Hawking was one of the scientists who knew the most in the world about black holes. So it was really shocking when he was wrong in the black hole theory wars. If you don't know what those wars are, it was this decades-long theoretical debate between Stephen Hawking and Leonard Susskind about what happens when something falls into a black hole. Leonard Susskind is, by the way, an amazing thinker as well, and one of the founding fathers of string theory. So what they debated is, what happens when something falls into a black hole? Is it lost to the universe forever, or is that information in some way preserved? And I'll give you a very terse summary of a really fascinating story. But what they uncovered was a law of the universe so fundamental that it had actually been overlooked by every preceding scientist. And now, in a lot of scientific circles, it's actually called the zeroth law of physics because it's really so fundamental. And that law is the law of conservation of information. So it turns out in a black hole, information is conserved. And that means that just like matter or energy, it can never be totally erased from the universe. There's something about it that the information becomes very entropically chaotic, it becomes very complex, and it's hard to go through that information computationally in any meaningful way. But in some very real way, it's preserved. So that was their resolution of what happens when something falls into a black hole, is that the information of what that is that falls into the black hole is actually forever preserved. It's actually preserved on the event horizon of the black hole, on like a 2D matrix of what you see when you look at a black hole. That surface of the black hole, the event horizon, is actually what preserves the information. But black holes follow the same laws as the universe. And what's true in a black hole is the extreme of physics, certainly, but it is the laws of physics tested to their most extenuating circumstance. So that's really important because that means that the law of conservation of information isn't just true of black holes, it's also true of the universe. Now that means that even though we think of ourselves as very infinitesimal and ephemeral beings, and justifiably so, by the way, if you think about the universe on even a geological, much less a cosmological timescale, humans are really such tiny fragmentary beings that you would almost look at the entirety of the universe and say that you can hardly say that humans exist at all. But what the black hole theory wars proved is that the information of who we are, the existence we have, the decisions we make, our very actions, is forever, indelibly, and inextricably written into the fabric of reality of all time. You know, I first heard about the law of conservation of information shortly after I was diagnosed with leukemia. And then later on, I was told that I would actually die from that leukemia. And then I ended up getting better. And then when I did, I had a lot of really fundamental questions about what I'm supposed to do with my time here and the kind of life that I'm supposed to live. So the law of conservation of information was really important to me because it underscored that what I do here is important in some way. Even if you hurled a black hole towards the Earth that was big enough that it would destroy everything in the solar system, there's still something about the information of who we are, the narratives of what we've done in our lives that would forever be inextricably, indelibly written into the very fabric of the universe. And that was, to me, a really powerful idea. And I think it also illustrates why we talk about intersectionality here in our weekly sessions. Because these ideas that may come from science or religion or philosophy can in some ways be thought of together. And in some ways, this law of the conservation of information has really important philosophical and almost religious implications. And so I think it's a very important and interesting idea to think about. And it was interesting that Stephen Hawking, who was wrong about black holes, even though he was one of the scientists who knew more than almost anybody in the world about black holes, that he would come up with a proof of his incorrectness that revealed something about the universe that's so fascinating. Now, I've given you again a very terse and very oversimplified version of the black hole theory wars. So I would encourage you to look up lectures on the black hole theory wars. Stephen Hawking has many lectures that you can find on YouTube. So does Leonard Susskind. And to Stephen Hawking's credit, when he realized that he was wrong about what happens when something falls into a black hole, he bought Leonard Susskind a bottle of wine because he was very gracious in admitting that he was wrong. All right, well, so I think this story illustrates several really interesting ideas and very important points. And another important point is having humility and knowing that you can be wrong and that when you're incorrect, it can reveal a lot of really important things that are going on around you. So I'm really grateful that you've all tuned in. I hope you found something spiritually nourishing about this message. And our whole goal here is to try and provide a discourse that's spiritually nourishing and that is interactive. So hopefully after COVID-19 abates, we'll be able to have more discussions in person as well, and we'll be able to talk more back and forth about some of these ideas. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for supporting the church and the community that we hope to serve and represent here. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Eli, and I'm here at the church at 3rd Monroe in Eugene, Oregon. And if you haven't heard, we've been going by the name Fiddler's Green as a church. But we are going to end up changing our name, and that's just because there's a really wonderful business in town called Fiddler's Green that's a golf company. And they're a family-run business, and they've been in operation for decades. So stay tuned, because we're probably going to move to a new YouTube channel and have a new name. But so far, we've really enjoyed being here, and I'm really grateful that you've tuned in and supported our channel and our congregation and our meetings. Thanks so much for your support. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope to see you again next week.